To infuse employee experience into the bloodstream of an organization, I really believe that you need to play on different boards simultaneously. So one is you need to get experience data because it's not engagement data or operational data. It's a different kind of data. And with that, you build empathy. The other thing is you need to start applying really an end-to-end approach. The third one is also really important, which is about to position EX as a service. I'm very happy to be here. Yeah, it's actually quite a mouthful, right? How to infuse employee experience into the bloodstream of the organization. And I hope in the next 20 minutes, I will be able to give you a little bit of an idea of how to do that. Before I move on quickly into one of my passions, which of course is employee experience, what is or who is Credit Suisse, I think is really important, just to make sure that everybody knows that. We're a bank, we're Swiss, we're headquartered in Switzerland, we are 160 years old. We basically have about 50,000 employees. That's discounting our, you could say, flexible contingent workers population. And we are a global wealth manager. So we have a lot of ultra net individuals who invest with us. I really have the fundamental belief that what we develop for our people to take away strain, to take away their biggest frustrations, and making sure that the pain points are taken away, you always have to do that with the inclusion of the voice of your employees. Right, so not one time, not two times, but throughout the whole process, making sure that you constantly get that feedback to make sure that what you develop really adds value and takes away the strain and it alleviates basically the pain points. So to infuse employee experience into the bloodstream of an organization, I really believe that you need to play on different boards simultaneously. So one is you need to get experience data, and I'll explain very quickly what I mean with that, because it's not engagement data or operational data. It's a different kind of data that you need. And with that, you build empathy. The other thing is you need to start applying really an end-to-end approach, right? So you need to start working cross-functional. It's not only within HR that you can alleviate or solve basically problems, because you need to have the journey view, as many people have probably already heard when you talk about employee experience. The third one is also really important, which is about to position EX as a service. So you change the operating model. Currently within Credit Suisse, I've said that also to our CHRO, I don't believe in a new COE. I really do not believe that EX should be a COE. EX should be a service provider. And I'll explain that also in the presentation, what I mean with that. So first and foremost, why do you need experience data? Well, what I said about experience data is very clearly that it's a different kind of data. So engagement data, which is often used as being a data set for experience data or for employee experience, is actually not good, fit for purpose. Experience data is a different kind of data. So engagement data is the commitment that people feel towards the organization, or how, for example, leadership values resonate with your people. Now, experience data is the quality of interactions that your people are having every time they have a contact with the organization. It can be physical, it can be digital, it can be a combination of both. And you need to start understanding if that is really creating a great experience or not. So by having that kind of experience, you'll be able to really also answer these three questions. One is, as you can see, which interactions are most important and most painful to the employees, which in that context that I already mentioned, so physical, digital, and of course also human, are really creating frictions, and what are the experience attributes? So how are these experiences being perceived, and are they perceived as being intended? That then allows you to really inform your priorities. So what I often see within other peers within HR, they start with onboarding, for example, as a journey to start improving that. I don't believe in that. I really first and foremost need data to understand where are the most, you could say, moments that matter. So the key decisions in an experience that either make or break that, and which one have a disproportionate effect on the overall employee experience. And that's a really important way to take into account, because it means You start looking at it at an end-to-end, and you're also starting to apply basically Pareto principle, saying, okay, we're going to take this first, and we're going to redesign this, or we're going to improve this, as opposed to, let's start with onboarding. Because it could be that your performance management is having a disproportionate effect. And it could be that a certain moment that mattered there is actually really, really creating strain and irritation and frustration. And so by solving that, you actually also take away a lot of that. Now, that doesn't mean you don't take onboarding after that, but it just means that you start understanding where do we need to start investing the people, the money, and also the time. It also helps you to set really great KPIs and start connecting it also to the business strategy. Now, there are different ways of basically looking at improvements, right? So one is this EX data that you will gather helps you to really start understanding, okay, is it within the remit that I possess, or is it within a different remit, and can they do it themselves? Or do they need capability? Is it tech, or is it is it in real life? Or is it a combination of both? And how do we need to make sure that we connect those touch points in the right way? So how to get that experience data? So first and foremost is you need to gather it, and you need to make sure that you have a measurement approach. It can be surveys, it can be observations, it can be all kinds of things, as long as it helps you to understand what the quality of your interactions are that the organization is offering to your people. Then, once you've done that, you need to measure the touch points, you need to measure the experience attributes, as I said, and also the moments that matter. That allows you to then create a baseline. Because what we're doing in Credit Suisse, we are moving towards having this actually every quarter, so I can actually, when we've done projects, show to the business that we're moving the needle. Because if you don't, you always get into a conversation which is about opinions, and everybody has an opinion, and about really beautiful PowerPoints, and everybody can make those, but if you haven't validated it, if you have experienced it, if you don't have the data, it's just a really nice PowerPoint or just an opinion. So basically, once you've converted that to insights and created these employee experience assets, like personas and the journeys and the user stories and the moments that matter, what I was saying is you need to have 3 data sets to create a robust insight. So if you only come to me with just one data set, I get feeble, because it means there can be a bias in there. So by creating 3 data sets, and it can be very low tech, you can do a survey, you can do interviews, contextual interviews, and you can do, for example, ethnography, which means you ask people basically to write down how they're feeling, what they're experiencing, or you do observations. I don't care. As long as there's 3 data sets that are linked to the same hypothesis, you are able then to say, okay, these insights are so robust that we can say, okay, this is a good starting point for us to look at, okay, these are the needs and the problems that people are having. Once you have that, you'll then be able to also identify the experiences with the highest friction, and also the ones that will give you basically the biggest impact if you redesign or improve them. Now, this kind of insights then help you to prioritize the journeys that you need to redesign. Like I said at the beginning, you can start with onboarding if the data shows you that that's actually something you need to take forward. You can then also decide on the quick wins, which means in which remit can we improve very quickly, and how do we do that? And you prioritize basically the moments that matter, that you want to redesign in such a way that they actually make the experience as opposed to break the experience. So then what's also really important, you have the data, you need to also have a basically holistic view if you want to improve this end-to-end in the employee experience. Like I already said, and some of you might also recognize this from Jacob Morgan, it's really about all things, basically both digital and physical, and also the human space. And these spaces, they constantly interact and intersect. So therefore, you need to really start understanding, again, which are the moments that matter, that make the biggest impact, and also where on these intersections are things going well and where are they not going well. And so by taking this kind of view, you also start understanding that the employee experience is not a linear kind of thing. It is a holistic and should also be seen as a 3-dimensional space in which you, by data, start understanding where to start focusing. What's really important is that you then start redesigning, like I said, redesign the employee experience with a repeatable and scalable approach, right? So you design, I really fundamentally believe that with every redesign of a journey, you start redesigning the company. The reason why, I'll come to that very quickly, is in 2 or 3 slides, but has to do with the fact that once you are redesigning a journey, you will also start looking at the processes that are underneath there. You will also start looking at the actors that are playing a role in that experience, and so forth and so forth. So basically, by having a scalable approach, which is really important, you are using the journeys as units of transformation. And by doing so, you're also changing the organization and changing the operating model, one journey by journey. Now, I've just highlighted very quickly here the process redesign. And the reason for that is like I already said, is you should always look at the employee journey as being the, you could say, top layer. So you have the top layer, and from the top layer, if you then look at it, there's a front stage. And the front stage is basically everything that the employee is experiencing when they interact with your organization, right? So it's your channels, it's the products, it's the actors, it's the touch points, interfaces, and basically really important. And it can also be seen by your employee. Now, the other thing, if you then go to a layer underneath there, which is basically the backstage, it is not visible for the employees, but we often forget that it actually is felt. We all know that we, for example, need to write or issue an IT ticket, and then some things happen with it. We don't exactly know what happens to it, but we feel, for example, that things don't work in the way that they should work. And it basically creates strain and it creates frustration. So although we don't see what's happening behind in the backstage, it still is creating an emotion with us as an employee. And then last but not least, which is the behind the scenes, which is basically your rules, your regulations, your policies, and your budgets. So if you look at this slide, you can really understand that if you're able to really take the employee journey view and the employee-centric view as your starting point, you will then be able to really start basically exposing all the things and all the organization parts that are working to make or break that experience. And by process redesigning these kinds of things, you will also be able to really then improve and take away some of the pain points and the strain of your employees. And at the same time, basically simplify and automate many of these processes that are currently in place to, at one point, create a much better employee experience for your employees. Now, last but not least, I was already talking about that I really believe that EX should be positioned as a service provider. And the reason for that is that if you create another COE or an SME, because I'm not really a fan of the Ulrich model, because the Ulrich model has served its purpose. Nonetheless, it is now basically also creating and maintaining certain silos which you don't want, which are basically also the enemy of employee experience. Because employee experience is about not creating another silo, not creating another COE. It is about breaking that and going across that. So what I mean with that is that if you want to create an end-to-end view, you need to start working together. So in this case, for example, learning and development needs to work with performance management, and that needs to work with compensation to make sure that within the whole journey, because that's how your employees view this, you create a favorable experience. There needs to be a clear performance management cycle. It doesn't matter how you implement that, but it needs to be clear to them, and it doesn't need to create any surprises. And then when that's connected to the conversations, that should actually be congruent to what has been communicated. And also goes for the learning and development. So as you can see, there's a lot of touch points in such a journey. Just as an example, in such a journey that actually asks, in this case, already HR to work together. I'm not even talking about IT. I'm not talking about also, for example, bringing in communications, corporate communications, marketing, people that have certain expertise that helps you to create a proposition that is congruent and that is consistent and that basically is very clear to your employee and reinforces what they expect, and also reinforces the communication
and what you've communicated. So it's really important, just to highlight that, is to actually position EX as one, a service that provides transparency, that enables you to set the right priorities for you as an organization. Two, to have basically the capability that you can then bring in to agile teams who work on journeys that provide, you could say, employee experience thinking, understanding how to build these assets, how to work with data, those kinds of things. And then last but not least, also to have EX basically delivered as a service to measure the business impact, that whenever you make improvements or you redesign journeys or moments that matter, that you can show basically from the data that you've moved the needle, and also what that means in terms of, for example, cost saving or creating heightened productivity, etc., etc. So as you can see here, it shouldn't be working as a standalone COE, but instead it should work as a service provider, helping the organization to embrace an end-to-end view, and also taking employee experience seriously. Very quickly, 2 minutes on the last things. So just a case study, very quickly. What we did is we looked at, okay, so if we want to onboard new line managers, how do we then do this? Now, in this project, we basically introduced the journey mindset, which already showed the different parties where in this journey they should work. The journey was set up from data, so there was a survey done, there were interviews done, and there were also some observations, which allowed us really then to create a journey view from the point of view of the line managers, and then also bringing in the different parties that were involved in every stage of that journey. We also created, in this case, proto-personas. We started with 2, but from the data and from the iterative approach, we actually found out that there was a 3rd one. So we made sure that that also came in. And last but not least, we also constantly went back to, you could say, our user group, which were 5 line managers, representing also the different personas, to make sure that the propositions that we developed throughout their journey, the products, the services, were constantly being validated and getting feedback basically from them, to make sure that they worked and they were adding value. Last slide, if it comes, and then I'll have some questions. So this is a different project. We are currently implementing a human capital management system. And what we did is we again went out to our employees and asked them basically, what do you think about our HR services and products? And from there on, we developed, in this case, EX assets, employee experience assets, so the personas, which basically is, who are you designing for? What I really like, or what I want to highlight in this slide, it shows you how you build empathy and how you basically also transfer that into all the employee experience assets. That's a really important one. So the personas are, who are you designing for, right? The employee lifecycle, well, we all know what that represents. It's the lifecycle stages. Then the moments that matter, which are basically the moments that can have a disproportionate effect on the overall employee experience. Then we break basically the journeys also up into, we also mapped out the user journeys to be really understanding the current employee experience within those journeys, the moments that matter. And then to make sure that we created something, we would actually, we created something that is people-centric or employee-centric. We then looked at solutions and making sure that we broke that down into user stories to make sure that what we developed within the HCM SaaS and the implementation was constantly taking the needs into account of our people. Last but not least, also what you can see here is that the personas are already basically showing a representation of our global workforce. So also already bringing in D&I in there, because it's important to have a representation that shows our